Summer of the Monkeys, Chapter 10. I woke up the next morning with a pounding headache and twice as sick as I had been the day before. My whole body screamed for water, and my throat was so dry I had to jiggle my Adam's apple 3 or 4 times before I could even swallow. I had such a nasty taste in my mouth it reminded me of the time I had eaten green persimmons. When I first opened my eyes, I didn't even remember a thing. For a few seconds, I didn't even know where I was. Everything I looked at was going round and round and round. Then, little by little, the spinning stopped and things started coming back to me. The monkeys, the whiskey still, drinking the sour mash, the loss of my britches. The more I thought about everything that had happened to me, the more ashamed I became. I tried covering my face with my pillow, but it didn't hide anything. I was lying there feeling sorry for myself and wondering how Rowdy was making out when Papa and Daisy came into my room. Papa smiled and said, "How do you feel?" "I'm sick, Papa. I'm sick enough to die." Papa laughed out loud and said, "I don't think you're going to die. You may think you will, but you won't. In a day or two, you'll be good as new." "Papa, I didn't know sour mash would make you drunk. I thought it had to be made into whiskey first." No. Sour mash will make you just as drunk as whiskey and twice as sick. Once that stuff gets down in your stomach, it just keeps on fermenting and you'll be sick for days." Up until then, Desi hadn't opened her mouth. She stood there looking disgusted and listening to Papa. Turning to leave the room, she said, "Well, I guess I better get busy because it looks like I have my work cut out for me today." I was so sick I didn't pay attention to what Daisy had said, but I should have known that I was in for another of her Red Cross nurse go-arounds, and that was all there was to it. I didn't have to worry about Mama coming in. She was still mad at me. That didn't bother me too much because Mama's mad spells didn't usually last very long. My Mama was just about like any other boy's Mama. She'd stay mad at me for a little while, then she'd start feeling sorry for me, and everything would be okay. Papa said, "I can't understand why you drank that sour mash. I know you found stills before, and I'm pretty sure you didn't drink any of that mash." I didn't, Papa. That was the first time I ever drank anything like that. Everything happened so fast. The first thing I knew, Rowdy and I were drinking it like water." "Well, why don't you start at the beginning and tell me what happened there, son? I need to get to the bottom of what happened down there." I could always talk to Papa better than I could to Mama, at least sometimes. It seemed he could understand me better. I figure it was because he had been a boy once. I told Papa everything that had happened, but I was so ashamed about losing my britches, I didn't look him in the eye while I was telling it. Papa laughed and said, "To me, it looks like that Jimbo monkey wanted to get you and Rowdy drunk so he could steal your britches. What do you think he did with them?" "I don't know, Papa. He could be wearing them for all I know. I wouldn't put anything past that old monkey." "Well, I don't see where there's been too much harm done, but if I were you, I wouldn't tie in any sour mash anytime soon. It might get to be a habit in your life, and that's not a good thing." "Papa, you don't have to worry about me," I said. "I won't be drinking any sour mash or any other kind of whiskey as long as I live. If drinking makes a fella as sick as I am, I won't ever drink again." Papa smiled and said, "You know, if a fella can learn something through experience when he's young, he won't forget it." "I will never forget this, Papa. If I ever get a hold of that monkey, he won't forget it either," I said through my teeth. Papa laughed. "I always figured a man can do almost anything if he puts his mind to it and doesn't give up." "I won't give up. I'll catch that monkey if I have to chase him clean to Arkansas." Getting up from the bed, Papa looked at his watch and he said, "Your mother and I are going to the store today. Is there anything you want me to tell your grandpa?" "Just tell him I'll be up to see him in a day or two, and that we'll have to figure out another way to catch those monkeys." Papa smiled and looked at me. "I don't suppose you want me to tell him how you lost your britches, do you?" "Ah, I don't care, Papa. Mama's going to tell Grandma, and she'll tell Grandpa. As long as we keep it in the family, I don't mind so much. But I don't want anyone else to know." Chuckling to himself, Papa left the room. It wasn't long until I heard our old wagon leave and screech its way up the road towards Grandpa's store. I had just about dozed off when, to my surprise, Daisy came into my room. She was dressed in her nurse's uniform, Red Cross, carrying a tray with a large bottle of castor oil and empty water glass. I could see she had a book tucked under her arm. Oh no, I thought. If she gives me a dose of castor oil and then starts reading to me, I'm gonna die. It was the same old thing that I had gone through 100 times, smiling all over. Daisy said, "Good morning, and how is my patient this fine morning?" Oh, for heaven's sakes, Daisy, please, I'm too sick to go through this today. I don't think I can stand it. Why didn't you go to the store with Mama and Papa? Oh, I wanted to. I wanted to go very much, but Jay Barry, a good nurse, never leaves a sick patient. You didn't have to stay here because of me. I'm not that sick. I'll never be that sick. For all the attention Daisy paid to my protest, I may as well have been talking to a stump. Taking her thermometer, she started shaking it. I just groaned and crawled way down under the covers. Daisy started pulling at the quilts. "Jay Barry, you're acting like a baby. Sit up here and let me examine you." "Go away. I'll be all right if you just go away and leave me alone." For a few seconds, there was complete silence. Then I heard Daisy say, "Well, it says in my nursing book that when a patient gets unruly, a nurse is supposed to be stern." Reaching down under the covers, Daisy grabbed a handful of my hair. I was squalling like a scared chicken as I was pulled to the head of my bed and propped into a sitting position with a pillow. "Now," said Daisy, sticking the thermometer into my mouth, "if you'll be patient, this will be over in a few minutes." I was too sick to fight anymore. "All right, if I die, it's your fault." "Jay Barry, you won't die. You may think you will, but you won't. In a day or two, you'll be as good as new." "I hope." You're just saying that because you heard Papa say it." "No, I'm not. I'm saying it because I'm a nurse. And nurses are supposed to cheer up their patients." I knew too well that once Daisy had gotten into one of her Red Cross nursing spells, it was ridiculous to even try to argue with her. So I just groaned, I closed my eyes, and sat there while she looked me over. Counting silently, Daisy took my pulse. Then she looked at my eyeballs. She felt my forehead. She tapped around on me with her fingers. She even laid her ear on my chest and listened to my heartbeat. From the expression on her face, I think I was in pretty good shape. "Jay Barry," she frowned and let out a low whistle as she looked at the thermometer. "You have a fever. It's almost busted this thermometer." This scared me a little. I knew I was sick, but I didn't think I was sick enough to bust the thermometer. "Let me see your tongue." By this time, I was getting a little bit on the nervous side. I stuck my tongue out as far as I could. "Yuck, your tongue is so coated it looks like the inside of Papa's shaving mug." "Is that bad?" I asked. "Oh, it's not too bad," said Daisy. "But it's bad enough. I think I know what's causing it." "You do? What's causing it?" "Remember what Papa said about your stomach being full of that old sour mash? As long as it's in there, you'll just stay sick and your tongue will be coated, Jay Barry." "Daisy, I'm sick all over, but it's not my tongue that's sick. What are you going to do?" "I don't know," she said as she reached over and picked up the book. It was her nursing book. Daisy wet her thumb on her tongue and started thumbing through. "Jay Barry, I don't know a thing about doctoring a drunk. I looked through all my nursing book and can't find anything, but I know that somewhere in here I've read it does how to keep a patient's tongue from being coated." "Daisy, you don't think I'm a drunk. Just because I got drunk once doesn't mean I'm a drunk." I'm not too sure about that," Daisy said, still turning pages and not looking at me. "From what I've heard and read, that's the way drunkards get going. They have one drink, Jay Barry, then they have another, and another, and another. And pretty soon they're drinking it by the barrel." "Daisy," I said, "if I live through this, you won't have to worry about me ever drinking any more whiskey or mash, I promise. Why, I'll even cross my heart and hope to die." With a very sad look on her face, Daisy said, I hope not, Jay Barry. I sure would hate for us to grow up and have people see you staggering around the street and say, that's the old drunkard Jay Barry. He's Daisy Lee's brother. I don't believe I could stand it. I just wouldn't put up with it. I'd tell people I didn't even know who you were. Oh, Daisy, I'm so sick now. I'm not an inch from the grave, and you keep talking about all these bad things. I thought your nurses were supposed to cheer their patients up. Just then, Daisy's face lit up, and she goes, here it is. Jerryberry, I think what you need is a big dose of castor oil. I always did think that the very thought of castor oil was enough to make a buzzard sick. Castor oil? Daisy, I couldn't take any of that nasty stuff. All you ever do is think about castor oil. If I mash a finger, you grab castor oil. Jayberry, castor oil isn't hard to take. If you close your eyes and swallow, you can't even taste it. I can taste it. I can taste it before I even take it. Holding the bottle about a foot above the glass, Daisy started pouring. The very sight of that sick, slimy-looking gook gurgling down into the glass was more than my poor old sick stomach could bear. I jumped out of bed, flew to a window, and threw up all over the place. As I was crawling back into bed, Daisy giggles and said, Jayberry, I'm a better nurse than you think I am. I knew that I'd have trouble getting you to take castor oil, so I did the next best thing. I let you see some of it. I figured if you saw it, it'd make you get sick and get rid of that old sour mash out of your tummy. And it worked. I bet you're feeling better. I guess I am. But if you really want to do something, bring me about a gallon of good, cool water. Oh, Jayberry, you couldn't drink a gallon of water. You just think I couldn't. I think I could drink 10 gallons right now. Well, if you think you can drink that much water, there's no use bringing it in a glass. I'll just bring the whole bucket. Excuse me. That's what she did and stood there and watched while I drank 3 whole dippers of water. Boy, if you and Rowdy keep drinking water like that, we'll be lucky if we got any left around here. How is Rowdy, I ask. I don't know. He won't let me get close to him. He's hiding. What's the matter with him? I don't know. He went to the barn lot and dug him a deep hole in that damp ground under the watering trough. About every 10 minutes he crawls out of the hole, drinks water. Every time I go out to see him, he growls and shows his teeth. I can't even get close to him. Did you have your nurse's uniform when you went out there? Jayberry, a nurse always has her uniform on when she's doing her work. I laughed and laughed. Daisy, Rowdy's no fool. He knows what a uniform means as much as I do. He's sick. He doesn't want you messing with him. I don't care. I'm going out there one more time. He growls at me. I'm going to take a bucket and fill that hole full of water and let him have it. You better not. He's liable to chase you up a tree. Sure enough, it wasn't long until I heard a big racket outside. Rowdy was barking and whimpering, and Daisy was yelling and scolding. Pretty soon everything quieted down, and I knew that old Rowdy had been overpowered, and he was getting the Red Cross treatment. I felt sorry for my old dog, but there wasn't a thing in the world I could do. I just pulled the covers over my head and went to sleep. Papa was right that he said in a day or two I'd be good as new. On the morning of the second day, I crawled out of the bed feeling almost like my old self again. Oh, I was a little nervous and a little wobbly on my feet, but otherwise I felt pretty good. Excuse me. As I walked into the kitchen, the family was sitting down to breakfast. Papa and Daisy started whooping and clapping like they hadn't seen me for 10 years. I knew they were kidding me, so I grinned, sat down, and helped myself to a double portion of everything. I was starving. When a fellow starts eating like that, he ain't sick anymore, said Papa. Oh, I feel good now, Papa. Right away, Mama started laying down the law to me about my drinking. She told me if I ever did anything like that, I could just pack my clothes and leave the house. And I could take that drunken old hound dog with me when I left. Daisy giggled and said, Mama, if Jayberry does leave home, he won't have to do much packing. Those monkeys got away with about everything he owns. Why, they even got away with his britches. I wanted to argue with Mama and Daisy, but I realized I didn't have a leg to stand on. So I sat there, just mad, hating monkeys, more determined ever to catch every last one of them little devils. I guess I'll have to stop my work and make you another pair of breeches. Papa laughed and said, it looks like I'm going to be minus another pair of my old overalls. Overalls in our family really got a good wearing out. Mama made mine from the backs of the ones that Papa wore. Papa wore out the front and I wore out the back. Jay Barry, old Rowdy's in pretty good shape. I finally got him to drink enough some warm milk and gave him a good cold bath in the watering trough. As soon as I ate my breakfast, I went out to the barn lot, and sure enough, there was Rowdy just lying on the ground and looking as if he didn't have a friend left in the world. I walked over, I patted my old dog on his head. I said, I know how you feel, boy. In fact, I don't see how you made it with Daisy messing with you. Sorry about that, bud. Rowdy was so sad he wouldn't even wag his tail. Come on, boy. Let's go to the store to have another talk with Grandpa about those monkeys. He might give you some meat. That was all it took to get him to come with me. On the way to the store, I stopped to watch a sight that all left me breathless. To my right, far up the hillside, there was a loud gobbling and beating of heavy wings. Then, up out of the green blanket into the sky, rose a flock of wild turkeys. I blinked my eyes at the burst of fiery bronze as they winged their way through the bright rays of the morning sun. Rowdy and I watched until they faded from sight in the thick timber of the river bottoms. Boy, Rowdy, wasn't that something to see? You just wait until I get me a gun. We'll have an old gobbler on our kitchen table, breakfast, dinner, and lunch. Every day until I'm old and gray-headed. A little farther along, just as Rowdy and I rounded a bend in the road, I stopped and stared in wonderment at the sight directly ahead. Here, there was a long, sloping hillside with milky white splotches stood out like spilt buckets of milk. The Ozarks' most beautiful flowers. They were called dogwoods. They were in full bloom. Mixed in with the green and the white, the deep glare of red buds gleamed like railroad flares in the dewy morning. As I stood there drinking in all that beauty, I said, Rowdy, Daisy says the old man of the mountains is taking care of everything in the hills. If he is, he's doing a good job. I had been so busy looking at all that Ozark beauty, I had forgotten about the monkeys. Holy smokes, Rowdy. We better stop this gawking around and get to the store. Grandpa will think we're never coming. To make up for lost time, I started off in a trot. Grandpa wasn't in the store when Rowdy and I arrived, but I knew that he was around somewhere because the door was wide open. Then I heard a loud banging come from the barn. I walked over and found him putting new spokes in one of his buckboard wheels. As Rowdy and I walked up, Grandpa smiled and said, Hi! Hi, Grandpa! With a sly look on his friendly old face, Grandpa looked all around, and there, leaning over close to me, he whispered, I got a jug of corn whiskey over there in the corner. Would you care for a little drink? I knew Grandpa was kidding me, so I grinned and I said, Oh, Grandpa, you know I'm not a drinking man. Well, I didn't think you were, but your papa told me you and Rowdy got on a pretty good tutor. I guess we did, Grandpa, but it wasn't my fault. That Jimbo monkey got us drunk, Grandpa. It seems like every time we get close to those monkeys, they make fools of us. Why, they even stole my britches. And I'll never live that down, Grandpa. I'll hear about it till I die. Grandpa exploded in laughter. He laughed and laughed and laughed. I even laughed a little bit, but I wasn't laughing about losing my britches. I was laughing at Grandpa. Rowdy thought because Grandpa was happy and I was happy, he should be happy. He wiggled and twisted all over the place. Grandpa finally got over his laughing spell and reached for his old red handkerchief. He took off his glasses, wiped them, and blew his nose. Now that we've had a good laugh, I think it's time we started thinking about catching those monkeys. We can't let them get away with stealing a fellow's britches. Grandpa, I haven't done anything but think about those monkeys. My thinker is all worn out. I don't know what to do. I tried everything from A to Z. I haven't caught one yet. Oh, I don't think we've tried everything yet. There's a lot of space between A and Z. Now here's what you do. You go on home and be ready about daybreak in the morning. I'll come by in the buckboard and we'll make a trip to town. I was really surprised that we were going to town because I didn't want to go to town because I didn't get to go to town about once every year or so. What are we going to town for, Grandpa? We're gonna find out how to catch those monkeys, boy. That's what we're going for. How do you know somebody in town that knows how to catch monkeys? No. I don't believe I know any monkey catchers, but there's a place where we can find out some. What kind of place is that, Grandpa? The library. I thought a second and said, oh, yeah, that's where they telling me they have all those books, thousands and thousands. That's the place. I don't care what kind of problem a man has, he can find answers in the library. Somewhere in one of those books we'll find the answers to our monkey catching problem. Boy, Grandpa, we should have thought about this library a long time ago. It would have saved a lot of wear and tear on Rowdy and me. Grandpa looked at me and he looked at Rowdy. I can't see any wear and tear on you. You both look like you're in pretty good shape. Rowdy and seed Grandpa looking at him, he figured it was a good time to let his wants be known. His old tail started thumping, he opened his mouth and he let out a boo, boo that scared the chickens out of the barn. What's that all about, boy? Rowdy whined, turned and bounded for the store. On reaching the porch, he stopped, looked back at us, let out another boo. What's gotten into him? I couldn't help but laughing a little. Oh, Grandpa, don't pay any attention to him. He wants a meat rind. Well, he seems to know where the meat rinds are. Let's see if we can get him one before he has a nervous breakdown. Rowdy wound up with a big fat meat rind, and I got my usual sack of candy. I thanked Grandpa and told him he wouldn't have to wait for me in the morning. I'd be ready and waiting. My promise to Grandpa about being ready and waiting for our trip to town got sidetracked during the night, though. I was sound asleep the next morning when Papa opened the door to my room. You better get up. Your Grandpa's here and he's waiting for you. Grandpa's already here, I said through sleepy eyes. What time is it? It's just breaking daylight. You better hurry. Your Grandpa's raring to go. I flew out of bed and jumped into my clothes. As I stepped into the kitchen, I saw to my surprise that everyone in the family was up. Mama was fixing breakfast and Daisy was setting the table. Papa and Grandpa were drinking coffee. Boy, I said, yawning and pouring water into the washpan. This early in the morning and everybody's already up. Looking at Grandpa, Mama said, Papa, this is the silliest thing I ever heard of. An old codger like you to town to read monkey books. Grandpa snorted. I can't see anything silly about it, daughter. We don't know anything about catching monkeys. Maybe in those books we can learn something. It's worth a try. Grandpa squirmed a little and said, have you ever been in a library, Grandpa? No, but I understand that anyone can go to a library and there's always a first time for everything, said Grandpa. It was 12 miles from where we lived to the hills to the little town of Tahlequah, Oklahoma, and it would take a good part of the day to get there. As soon as breakfast was over, Grandpa looked at me and said, well, we better be on our way. I got a lot of things to do in town. Mama, Papa, and Daisy followed us out to Grandpa's buckboard. Rowdy was sitting in the spring seat looking at us, whimpering and whining. His old tail was wagging so fast that I just knew it was going to come unscrewed from his body. Grandpa chuckled and said, well, would you look at that? I think that dog knows we're going somewhere. What's the matter? I think he's bound and determined to go with us. Well, Rowdy, I said, you get down out of that buckboard. You can't go to town with us. What's the matter with you? Rowdy dropped his old head and wouldn't look at me. His tail was the first part of him to die. Very slowly it stopped wiggling. To make things worse, he squirmed his rear end around until his tail was hanging over the back of the spring. It looked like a dead grapevine. Rowdy's sympathy-getting act melted old Grandpa's heart. He glanced at Rowdy, then he turned to me and said, I don't see why Rowdy can't go to town with us. Lots of people take their dogs to town. Oh, Grandpa, if we take him with us, there's no telling what might happen. I don't see how Rowdy could get in any trouble in town. We're going to stay in the wagon yard, and you could tie him under the buckboard. He'll be all right. Grandpa, I'd like to take Rowdy to town. I don't like to go anywhere without him, but I'm afraid I might lose him in that big town. If that happens, I'd just die. Rowdy knew that we were talking about him with a low moan. He lay down on the spring seat and he closed his eyes. He must have been holding his breath because I couldn't see one speck of life anywhere in his body. His dying act really stirred everybody up in the family. All right, I give up. He can go with us, but I don't like it. I just hope everything comes out all right. And Grandpa climbed into the buckboard, gathered up the lines, and said, "We better be on our way. We've wasted too much time as it is. Let's go." Mama came over and started laying down the 10,000 laws that they have for their boys. Things like being a good boy, minding Grandpa, washing my face, combing my hair. I just stood there and waited until Mama ran out of breath. Then I said, "Mama, I can't understand you sometimes. Every time you send me to the store, I don't care if it's for 2 or 3 old things, you always write them down. Why, Mama, I couldn't remember all those things if I had 10 heads." Mama smiled and said, "I don't expect you to do everything I ask you, but if you do a few of them, I'll be happy." Daisy laughed. "Jay Barry, you sure look funny running around with 10 heads. Everybody was laughing, but at Daisy's remarks when Grandpa said, "Get up," to the mares, and we took off. Just as we were leaving, Daisy yelled, "Jay Barry, you better not forget my ribbon. If you do, don't come back." I didn't even look back at her. The road we followed stayed at the edge of the foothills for a short distance, and we made a right turn and ran into the river bottoms. We had no more than entered the bottoms when things began to happen. Rabbits, squirrels, groundhogs, and quail began darting across the road. Once a mama deer with a spotted baby leapt across the road and disappeared on a thick cane brake. Rowdy was on needles and pins. Every time something would zip across the road, his ears would stand straight up and he would whine. He wanted to chase something so bad he could hardly stand it. I understood how he felt. I loved him up a little and said, "I know how you feel, boy, but just let on like you don't see a thing. We don't have time to stop. I don't have time to let you do any hunting. We got to get to town. We got to catch those monkeys. I don't believe I've ever seen so much game. After we catch those monkeys, maybe we can take a few days off and do some hunting." "That'd be great, Grandpa. Rowdy would love it." About halfway through the bottoms, the road made a sharp left turn. Just as we made the turn, a big old mama coon with 3 little babies wadded across the road. It was too much for Rowdy. He just couldn't stand it anymore. Letting out a bellow that busted my eardrums, he came close to scaring the mares out of their harness. He leapt down from the buckboard and took off after the coons. I stood up on the buckboard and yelled as loud as I could, "Rowdy, you better leave those baby coons alone. That mama will skin your hide. Come on." Mumbling something about a yelling boy and a bawling hound, Grandpa finally got the mares settling down. We sat there waiting to see what would happen. From out in the bottoms, we heard a loud commotion. That mama coon was squalling and Rowdy was howling like he was hung up on a barbed wire fence. With a worried look on his face, Grandpa said, "Boy, they're going at it, ain't they? You think Rowdy's going to be okay?" "Oh, don't worry about Rowdy, Grandpa. He's been through this 100 times. You'd think that by now he would learn to leave coons alone. He never does, though. He always goes back for more." It wasn't long until the squalling and the howling stopped. About a minute later, Rowdy came tearing out of the brush with a happy look on his face. I didn't have to tell him to get into the buckboard. He made one jump and landed in the spring seat. He had a raw red scratch right across the tip of his nose. "Rowdy, I don't believe you'll ever learn anything. I don't. You know you can't whip a coon, especially a mama coon with babies." Chuckling to himself, Grandpa tapped the mares. "Well, there's one thing you can say for Rowdy. He's going to make this trip exciting." Pause. Now that's chapter 10, and we're going to finish that up. And we'll get into chapter 11, and I'm going to try to upload it today. All right.